Welcome to another video. My name is Amsterdam Comic Geek and I'm recording this at the beginning of October 2020. But a couple of years ago, a friend of mine brought me a big bag filled with comics. And he asked me if I wanted to take care of them because he had no use for them anymore. And I said, sure, bring them in. And it's a couple of years later and I went through the whole stack and I thought I placed everything in my collection, and then the other day I came across a big box and there were still some comics in there from the big pile of comics from my friend. So I was happily surprised to find these actually, and I thought, what the heck, I'll just show you this stack of comics. It's mostly from the 1990s. There are some Dutch translations in there, but most of them are English comics. So Marvel and Image and other stuff. And I thought, instead of doing a comic book haul, I'll just show you this stack of comics. So let's go back to the 1990s. This is a collector's preview of Generation X. And it's pretty cool. Of course, Chris Bercello was the artist on this series for the longest time, and he did this fold-out cover, as you can see. Now, Generation X was written by Scott Lobdell, if I pronounce the names correctly, and if I don't, I'm sorry about that. And this is like a preview of what's to come when it comes to this series. And that's pretty cool. With interviews with Chris Bercello or Bercello himself, which is cool because I never knew what he looked like. Well, this is what he looked like in the 1990s, people. And some stuff about the characters, the new team of mutants, because we had the X-Men, then we had the New Mutants, and these are basically the new mutants, so to speak. This is the writer, Scott Lobdell. And what I also liked about it, there's an interview with Richard Starkings in it. And that's the guy who basically invented computer lettering, so to speak. So I thought that was interesting. So I already read this one, as you can tell. But I'm very happy with this issue. Another comic that was in there was Crimson. I never heard of this series. It's by Augustine and Humberto Ramos, and I'm not a big fan of Humberto Ramos, to be honest. This is a Dutch issue, by the way. Maybe you know this series. Humberto Ramos always gives people size 20 shoes. I don't know how big. They're just huge shoes. Ridiculous. He's not my favorite Spider-Man artist, but maybe you say like, oh, I love his work. And that's fine because to each their own. 21 Down. I've never heard of this series before either. It's by Wildstorm. And this is just number 12. It looks pretty cool though. And the art is by Jesus Saez and Jimmy Palmiotti, if you can. Hold on. It's pretty neat. If any of these comics seem familiar to you, maybe you've read them. Look, this is cool. This is an advertisement of Smallville. I think this is from 2003 or something. It's not. This is not the 1990s, but still, it's nice to see these old advertisements because they give you a sense of what was on the television back then. What was available in Hollywood. Again, if you know any of these series, please let me know. This is Tales of the Marvel Universe, special collector's items issue. With another great wraparound cover. I said fold out, I think, in the beginning of the video, but I meant wraparound cover. Pretty neat. A lot of people working on it. the infamous Mark Waid. I like Tom DeFalco as a writer, Rick Leonardi, Kurt Busiek, who I interviewed last year. I'm still looking at the audio files if I may be able to put that on this YouTube channel. Mark Bernardo, well, you can read it. Howard Mackey. It's all basically snippets of stories, and then you have to read a regular monthly series to know what's going to happen next. So it's basically a big advertisement comic for stuff going on in the Marvel Universe after the big Onslaught event, which is starting, I guess, with this X-Men comic. Now, I never read the Onslaught event, I must say, because the 1990s are kind of a blur when it comes to comics, because in the early 90s I was collecting a lot of comics. I was still in high school, but later on I felt like if I ever want to score a girl or a date, I must not be so nerdy. So I stopped reading comics. Well, the girls were not the only reason, actually. I was disinterested for a while in comic books, and later rekindled my love for comics. But that's why when it comes to the 1990s, I haven't read a lot of stuff. Well, I've read, of course, the Spider-Man comics and the Clone Saga, but there's still a lot to rediscover from that era, and I've never read the Onslaught comics either. And another wraparound cover, I hope you can see it. So I haven't read this either, but I love the old X-Men. If there's a comic that you see in this video that you want to have a special look at in a new video, please let me know in the description below. This is a Dutch edition. It's called Crossover Series, and it's basically crossovers from different kind of superhero teams or characters from different kind of publishers. So this is a crossover between Generation 13 and Generation X, and that's a crossover between Marvel Comics and Image. I've read this one. It's 2 stories. I really liked it. I liked the second story a lot. And I read a big stack of Generation X last year. I thought it was pretty good. I liked it as a mutant series. This is another one in the crossover series. This is Wildcats and the X-Men, but in Dutch they were called the X-Mannen. Or they're still called the X-Mannen, but nowadays this publisher that published comics doesn't exist anymore. Basically, they don't produce Dutch comics of Marvel or DC. I haven't read this one yet. The funny thing is, the 1990s have a reputation for being very bad. But compared to the nowadays market, I think there's a lot of great stuff in the 1990s. Well, you had the boom of investors, of course, with a lot of variant covers and a lot of special editions and foiled, plastic foiled wrapped kind of comics back in the day. And that boom kind of collapsed in the late 1990s. And Image was new on the scene, and they really had an impact on the way comics were drawn, with a lot of pin-up art, basically. That's what people remember of the 1990s. But when I read these comics from the 1990s, there's a lot of great good stuff in there. So I'm not really sure if the reputation is that fair to the comics that came out back in the day. But let me know what your view on the 1990s is, and if there are any particular series you remember from back in the day that you're really fond of and would recommend to other people. I'll resume going through this stack in my next video, because I want to keep these videos a bit on the short side. So I'll see you guys at the next one, and then we'll continue looking through this stack of comics. Thank you for watching.